You know that moment when someone you love looks you dead in the eye and tells you exactly what they think you're worth, not with words like "I believe in you" or "you've got this," but with the kind of silence that cuts deeper than any insult ever could. That's what happened to me at Rosewood Manor, standing in a ballroom that cost more per hour than most people make in a month, while my sister Emma made sure everyone within earshot knew I didn't belong there. I should have seen it coming. The way she'd been asking pointed questions about my budget for weeks, the little comments about being realistic and knowing your limits. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. But I was so caught up in the magic of finally finding my perfect venue that I missed all the warning signs. Sometimes when you're desperate to believe in something beautiful, you ignore the ugly truth staring right back at you. I never thought I'd be the type of person who cared about having a fancy wedding. Growing up, I was always the practical one, the sister who bought generic cereal and clipped coupons and drove the same beat-up Honda Civic for 8 years until the transmission finally gave out. Emma was the one who got manicures every 2 weeks and bought designer purses and somehow always managed to land jobs that paid twice what mine did, despite having the same degree from the same college we both graduated from 3 years apart. But when David proposed to me on a random Tuesday evening in our tiny apartment kitchen, something shifted inside me. Maybe it was the way he got down on one knee right there between the refrigerator and the breakfast counter, or how he stumbled over his words because he was so nervous, or the fact that the ring was clearly something he'd saved up for months to afford. For the first time in my adult life, I wanted something extravagant. I wanted one perfect day, where everything was exactly the way I dreamed it would be. The problem was, dreams cost money. A lot of money. And working as a junior marketing coordinator at a small nonprofit doesn't exactly come with a salary that screams luxury wedding budget. David made decent money as a mechanic, but we'd been saving every penny for a down payment on a house. The wedding fund was basically whatever we could scrape together from our tax refund and the birthday money my grandmother had been giving me since I turned 18. I spent weeks researching venues online, calling around, getting quotes that made my stomach drop every time. Everything beautiful was either completely out of our price range or booked solid for the next 2 years. I started looking at community centers and church basements, trying to convince myself that all that mattered was marrying David, not where we did it. But every time I walked into another fluorescent-lit space with folding tables and industrial carpeting, something inside me deflated a little more. That's when I found Rosewood Manor. It wasn't even supposed to be on my list. I'd seen their website months earlier and immediately clicked away when I saw the starting prices. But I was having lunch with my coworker Jessica, complaining about how impossible wedding planning was, when she mentioned that her cousin had worked there and said they sometimes had last-minute cancellations that they'd discount just to fill the space. "It can't hurt to call," she said, stealing a French fry off my plate. "The worst they can say is no," so that afternoon I called, and somehow miraculously, they did have a cancellation. A Saturday evening in October, just 4 months away. The bride had called off the engagement after finding out her fiancé had been cheating with her maid of honor, and they were desperate to fill the slot. The event coordinator, a woman named Patricia who sounded like she'd been working weddings since before I was born, quoted me a price that was still expensive, but just barely within reach if we cut back on everything else. "I can hold it for 24 hours, she said. "But I'll need a deposit by tomorrow afternoon to secure the date." I hung up and immediately called David at the shop. He was in the middle of working on a transmission, but when I told him about Rosewood Manor, about the cancellation and the discount and the fact that it was actually possible, he didn't hesitate. "Book it," he said. "We'll figure out the rest later." That evening, we drove out to see the venue in person. It was everything I'd imagined and more. The manor house dated back to the 1920s, all ivy-covered stone walls and tall windows that caught the light just right. The ballroom had crystal chandeliers and hardwood floors that gleamed like they'd been polished that morning. There were gardens with rose bushes and a little stone gazebo where we could have the ceremony, and a wraparound porch with rocking chairs and string lights that would be perfect for cocktail hour. Patricia walked us through everything, pointing out details I never would have noticed on my own. The hand-painted molding around the ceiling, the original stained glass windows, the way the natural light filled the space during golden hour. She showed us photos from previous weddings, couples who looked impossibly happy dancing under those same chandeliers, cutting cakes at the same elegant tables we'd be using. "It's perfect," I whispered to David as we stood in the middle of the empty ballroom, trying to picture it filled with our friends and family. He squeezed my hand. "It really is." The next morning I called in sick to work and drove straight to the bank to get a cashier's check for the deposit. It was more money than I'd ever spent on anything that wasn't rent or car payments, but as I sat in Patricia's office signing contracts, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months of wedding planning: pure, uncomplicated joy. "Congratulations," Patricia said, shaking my hand across her mahogany desk. "October 15th is all yours." I floated through the rest of that week, telling everyone who would listen about Rosewood Manor. I showed David's mom photos from their website during our weekly dinner together. I sent my best friend Sarah a virtual tour video I found on their social media. I even called my grandmother in Florida to describe every detail of the venue, knowing she'd be too excited to sleep that night. But I saved the best reveal for last. Emma, my sister, and I had always had a complicated relationship. She was 2 years older, and had somehow managed to make those 2 years feel like a lifetime of superiority. In high school she was homecoming queen while I was in the debate club. In college she pledged the popular sorority while I lived in the honors dorm. After graduation, she landed a marketing job at a Fortune 500 company, while I took the nonprofit position because I wanted to make a difference, not just money. The thing was, I never really minded the differences between us until she started treating me like they made her better than me. It started small, little comments about my career choice or my apartment or the fact that I shopped at Target instead of Nordstrom. But over the years, it had evolved into something more pointed, like she genuinely believed I was settling for less because I wasn't capable of more. When David and I got engaged, Emma's first reaction wasn't congratulations. It was, "Well, I hope you're not planning anything too elaborate. You know how expensive weddings can be." I'd bitten my tongue then, but I was excited to prove her wrong, so 2 days after I'd booked Rosewood Manor, I invited her over for dinner to share the news. Emma arrived wearing a new designer blazer that probably cost more than my monthly car payment, carrying a bottle of wine that she set on our kitchen counter like she was doing us a favor by bringing something decent to drink. She complimented our apartment in that way she had, making it sound like she was impressed we'd managed to make such a small space look so cozy. So she said, settling into our second-hand dining chair with her wine glass, "Tell me about this wedding planning. Please tell me you're not thinking about one of those big church receptions with the folding tables and potluck dinner." David shot me a look across the table. We'd talked about how to handle Emma's inevitable commentary, agreeing that I'd take the lead since she was my sister and my problem to manage. "Actually," I said, trying to keep my voice casual, "we booked Rosewood Manor." Emma paused with her wine glass halfway to her lips. "I'm sorry, what?" "Rosewood Manor, you know that historic venue out on Maple Ridge Road. We're having both the ceremony and reception there." She set down her glass with more force than necessary. "Olivia, that place costs like $15,000 just for the venue rental." "I know how much it costs," I said evenly. "We got a good deal on a cancellation." Emma laughed, but not the kind of laugh that meant she thought something was funny. The kind that meant she thought I was delusional. "Even with a discount, that place is way beyond your budget. I mean, come on. You work for a non-profit, and David fixes cars. That's not exactly Rosewood Manor money." The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire that had just started burning. David's jaw tightened, but he didn't say anything. He knew this was between Emma and me, and he wasn't going to make it worse by getting defensive about his job or our finances. "We can afford it," I said simply. "Can you though?" Emma leaned forward, her voice taking on that concerned big sister tone that had always made my skin crawl. "Because the venue is just the beginning. Liv, there's catering, flowers, photography, music. It all adds up incredibly fast, and I'd hate to see you get in over your head financially right when you're starting your marriage." I could feel heat rising in my cheeks, but I forced myself to stay calm. "We've done the math, Emma. We're fine, have you?" She pulled out her phone and started typing. "Because I'm looking at their catering packages right now, and the cheapest option is $85 per person. How many people are you inviting?" 100, 150. That's like $12,000 just for food, not including alcohol or service charges or tax. David reached across the table and took my hand. I could see in his eyes that he wanted to tell Emma to mind her own business, but he was letting me handle it my way. Emma, I said carefully. I appreciate your concern, but we're not asking you to pay for anything. We've got it covered. She was scrolling through something else on her phone now, probably their full price list. Flowers are going to run you at least $3,000 if you want anything that doesn't look cheap. Photography starts at $2,000 for someone halfway decent. DJ is probably another $1,000, minimum. And that's not even counting your dress, David's tux, invitations, decorations. She looked up from her phone with what I can only describe as pity. Sweetie, you're talking about a $40,000 wedding. Maybe more. I just don't want you to make a financial mistake that you'll be paying off for the next 10 years. I felt something snap inside me like a rubber band stretched too far. It's not a mistake, Emma. It's our wedding day. I know it is, and I want it to be perfect for you. But perfect doesn't have to mean expensive. There are so many beautiful, affordable options. That little venue by the lake, where the Hendersons had their daughter's wedding last year. Or the community center downtown. They've renovated it, and with the right decorations it could look really elegant. We don't want the community center, I said, my voice getting sharper. We want Rosewood Manor. Emma sighed like I was a child insisting on staying up past bedtime. Wanting something and being able to afford something are two different things, Liv. I'm just trying to help you be realistic here. That word. Realistic. It was Emma's favorite weapon, the one she'd been using on me for years. Be realistic about your career goals. Be realistic about what guys are actually going to be interested in you. Be realistic about what you can achieve. Always delivered with just enough concern in her voice to make it sound like love instead of criticism. We are being realistic, David said finally, his voice carefully controlled. We've looked at our budget, we've made sacrifices in other areas, and we can make this work. Emma turned to him with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. David, I know you want to give Olivia her dream wedding. That's really sweet. But as someone who's been through this process, I'm telling you that costs spiral out of control faster than you can imagine. My wedding ended up costing $20,000 more than we budgeted for, and we had a lot more financial cushion than you guys do. There it was. The reminder that Emma's wedding 3 years ago had been everything mine was trying to be. 200 guests, designer dress, 8-piece band, flowers that looked like they belonged in a museum. Her husband Marcus made 6 figures in sales, and Emma's marketing director salary meant they could afford whatever they wanted without thinking twice. Maybe, I said quietly. Our priorities are different than yours were. Emma's smile faltered slightly. What do you mean by that? I mean, maybe we're willing to sacrifice other things to have the wedding we want. Maybe we don't need to go out to dinner twice a week or buy new clothes every month or take expensive vacations. Maybe this one day matters enough to us that we'll make it work. The silence that followed was thick and uncomfortable. I could see Emma processing my words, trying to decide if I just insulted her lifestyle or if she was being oversensitive. David was still holding my hand, his thumb tracing small circles on my palm, in a way that meant he was proud of me for standing up for myself, but worried about where this conversation was heading. Look, Emma said finally. I'm not trying to be the bad guy here, I'm just worried about you. Both of you. Starting a marriage with a ton of wedding debt hanging over your heads isn't exactly setting yourselves up for success. We're not going into debt, I lied. Because the truth was, we were not crushing debt, but we'd definitely be paying off credit cards for a while. The venue deposit had taken most of our savings, and everything else would have to be financed somehow. David had already picked up extra weekend shifts at the shop, and I'd started freelance writing projects in the evenings to bring in additional income. We'd canceled our streaming subscriptions, started buying generic groceries, postponed the house hunting indefinitely. But I wasn't about to admit any of that to Emma. Not when she was sitting in my kitchen drinking wine that cost more than I spent on groceries in a week, telling me what I could and couldn't afford.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Good, she said, though her tone suggested she didn't believe me. Because I've seen too many couples start their marriages fighting about money. It's one of the biggest predictors of divorce, you know. And there it was, the nuclear option. Emma's way of letting me know that she didn't just think our venue choice was financially irresponsible, she thought it was going to destroy our relationship. David's grip on my hand tightened. I think we're done talking about this, he said, his voice deadly calm. Emma raised her hands in mock surrender. Okay, I can take a hint. I just care about you guys, that's all. I want you to be happy. The rest of the dinner was strained, filled with forced conversation about work and the weather, and anything that wasn't weddings. Emma left early, claiming she had an early morning meeting but not before giving me a hug that felt more like a warning than an expression of love. Just think about what I said. Okay, she whispered in my ear. It's not too late to change your mind. After she left, David and I cleaned up the dinner dishes in silence. Finally, as I was loading the dishwasher, he spoke up. You know she's wrong, right? I turned to look at him. About what? About all of it. About us not being able to afford this. About us making a mistake. About starting our marriage with money problems. We're going to be fine, Liv. Maybe it'll be tight for a while, but we're going to be fine. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to hold on to the confidence I'd felt when I'd first walked into Rosewood Manor and knew it was perfect. But Emma's words had planted seeds of doubt that were already starting to grow. What if she's right, though? I asked quietly. What if we're being stupid about this? David dried his hands on the dish towel and turned to face me completely. Do you remember what you said when we were standing in that ballroom? When Patricia was showing us where the head table would go and how the lighting would look during dinner, I shook my head. You said it felt like home, not like a venue or a party space, but like home. You said you could picture our kids playing in those gardens someday, and our grandchildren running around during family reunions. You said it felt like the beginning of everything we wanted our life to be. I did remember saying that, though I'd thought David had been too distracted by the details to really hear me. That's not something you can put a price on, Liv. That feeling, that certainty that you found the right place. Emma can run all the numbers she wants, but she's never going to understand what it means to find something that feels like home when you've been searching for it your whole life. He was right, and I knew he was right, but something had shifted during dinner. Emma had taken what felt like the most exciting decision David and I had ever made together and turned it into a source of anxiety. Every time I thought about Rosewood Manor now, I heard her voice asking if I could really afford it, if I was being realistic, if I was making a mistake that would haunt our marriage for years to come. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, doing math in my head. Emma was right about the costs adding up quickly. Even with a modest guest list and careful budgeting on everything else, we were looking at a total that made my chest tight with worry. Maybe we could pull it off without going too deep into debt, but it would mean 2 years of living extremely carefully, of saying no to everything that wasn't absolutely necessary. Was it worth it? Was one perfect day worth 2 years of financial stress? I didn't have an answer, and that scared me more than the money. The next few weeks were a blur of planning and second-guessing. Every vendor meeting, every decision about flowers or music or photography, came with Emma's voice in the background asking if I could really afford it. I found myself constantly running numbers, looking for ways to cut costs, wondering if there was still time to cancel everything and start over with a more realistic venue. David noticed my change in mood. Of course. He started bringing home real estate listings for small houses in nice neighborhoods, talking about how maybe we could find something perfect within our budget if we were patient. He never said it was because of the wedding expenses, but I could see him doing the same math I was doing, realizing that our timeline for buying a house had stretched from 2 years to 5 or maybe longer. We could always do a smaller wedding, he said one evening as we sat on our couch, my laptop open to a catering menu that seemed designed to cause heart palpitations. I don't want a smaller wedding, I said, though. Even as I said it, I wondered if that was true anymore, or if I was just being stubborn. Then we don't do a smaller wedding, he said simply. Babe, I would marry you in our apartment kitchen with takeout pizza and be the happiest man alive. The venue, the flowers, all of it. That's not what makes it special. What makes it special is that we're choosing to build a life together. I knew he meant it, and I loved him for meaning it, but it didn't make the financial reality any less daunting. If anything, his willingness to sacrifice his own dreams to make mine possible made me feel worse about the whole situation. 3 weeks after the dinner with Emma, I was at my desk at work trying to focus on a grant application when my phone buzzed with a text from my sister. Lunch today. My treat. Want to apologize for being pushy about the wedding stuff. I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let Emma think about what she'd said and how it had made me feel. But another part of me missed my sister, missed the relationship we'd had before wedding planning turned everything into a financial comparison. Sure, I texted back. Angelo's at noon. Perfect. See you there. Angelo's was our usual spot, a little Italian place, halfway between our offices where we'd been meeting for lunch since Emma started her job downtown. It was casual and loud enough that we could have real conversations without worrying about being overheard, and their pasta salad was good enough to make up for almost any awkwardness. Emma was already at our usual table when I arrived, looking perfectly put together in a way that reminded me I'd forgotten to put on makeup that morning, and my blouse had a small stain from where I'd spilled coffee in the car. "Thanks for coming," she said as I sat down. "I ordered your usual." That was Emma's way of showing affection, remembering small details and taking care of logistics so other people didn't have to worry about them. It should have made me feel loved, but instead it made me feel managed, like she'd already decided how this conversation would go, and was just waiting for me to catch up. "I owe you an apology," she continued once I'd settled in with my water glass. "I was completely out of line the other night. Your wedding planning decisions are none of my business, and I shouldn't have questioned your budget or made you feel bad about choosing Rosewood Manor." It was a perfectly crafted apology, the kind Emma was good at giving when she realized she'd pushed too hard. Sincere enough to sound genuine, specific enough to show she understood what she'd done wrong, but still somehow leaving room for her to be right about the underlying issue. "Thank you," I said, because that's what you say when someone apologizes, even when you're not sure they really mean it. "I think I was projecting my own anxiety about wedding costs onto you," she went on. "Marcus and I are still paying off some of the overages from our wedding, and I guess I didn't want to see you go through the same stress we did." This was news to me. Emma had never mentioned having any regrets about her wedding budget, and certainly never suggested that they were still dealing with debt from it 3 years later. "I didn't know you guys were still paying things off," I said carefully. Emma waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, it's not a big deal. Just the photographer and the band cost more than we expected, and we decided to upgrade the flowers at the last minute. You know how it is. Once you're in the middle of planning, it's hard to say no to things that would make the day even more special." Our salads arrived, giving me a moment to process what she'd just said. If Emma and Marcus, with their combined 6-figure income and family money, had still ended up overspending on their wedding, what did that mean for David and me? "The thing is," Emma continued, stabbing a cherry tomato with more force than necessary, "I've learned that the actual wedding day goes by so fast that you don't really notice most of the details you spend so much time and money planning. Like I couldn't tell you what half the centerpieces looked like, and we spent $800 on them." She was doing it again, not directly telling me I was making a mistake, but sharing information designed to make me question my choices. "I'm sure your day was beautiful though," I said neutrally. It really was, but you know what I remember most, the moments that didn't cost anything extra. Marcus's face when I walked down the aisle, our first dance, my dad's speech, dancing with my college friends until my feet hurt. Those are the things that mattered, not whether the linens were ivory or champagne. I took a bite of my salad and tried to figure out what Emma was really trying to say. Was she genuinely trying to help me keep perspective on what mattered about the wedding day? Or was she still trying to convince me that Rosewood Manor was an expensive mistake disguised as a romantic gesture? "I appreciate you sharing that," I said finally. "I think it's good to remember that the marriage is more important than the wedding." Emma smiled, like I'd just passed a test I didn't know I was taking. "Exactly, and that's why I wanted to tell you about something I heard about yesterday. Here it comes," I thought. My friend Rebecca works for an event planning company, and she told me about this venue that just opened up about 30 minutes outside the city. It's called Willowbrook Farm, and it's supposed to be absolutely gorgeous. Rustic but elegant, with a barn that's been completely renovated and these amazing outdoor spaces for ceremonies. I kept eating my salad and let her talk, knowing that resistance would only make her push harder. The best part is, they're trying to build up their reputation, so they're offering packages at like half what most venues charge. Rebecca said she saw photos from a wedding they did last month, and it looked like something out of a magazine. Emma pulled out her phone and started scrolling through what I assumed were photos of Willowbrook Farm. "Look at this," she said, turning the screen toward me. I had to admit, the photos were beautiful. Rolling green fields, a restored barn with string lights and exposed beams, outdoor ceremony space with a backdrop of mature oak trees. It looked like the kind of place where couples took engagement photos for Pinterest boards. "It's lovely," I said, handing her phone back. "Rebecca thinks she could get you a tour this weekend if you're interested, just to see it, no pressure. But Liv, I'm telling you, this place is going to be booked solid once word gets out. Getting in now would be like buying stock in a company right before it goes public." I set down my fork and looked at my sister across the table. Really looked at her, trying to figure out if she genuinely thought she was helping me, or if she was so uncomfortable with my choice to spend money on something she didn't think I should want, that she couldn't stop herself from trying to fix it. "Emma," I said slowly, "I already booked Rosewood Manor. I signed a contract and put down a deposit." "I know, but most places will let you out of the contract if you find it within 30 days. There might be a small cancellation fee, but it would be a fraction of what you'd save by switching venues." The words hit me like cold water. She'd actually researched cancellation policies. She'd spent time figuring out how I could get out of the venue contract I'd been so excited to sign. "I don't want to cancel Rosewood Manor," I said quietly. Emma leaned forward across the table, her voice taking on that concerned big sister tone again. "But what if this farm is even more perfect? What if it's everything you love about Rosewood Manor, but at a price that doesn't stress you out for the next 5 years?" "It's not going to be more perfect, Emma. Because Rosewood Manor is already perfect. For me, for David, for the wedding we want to have." She sat back in her chair, and I could see her recalibrating, trying to figure out a different angle of approach. "Okay," she said finally. "I hear you. I just want to make sure you've considered all your options before committing to something so expensive. That's what big sisters are for, right? Making sure you don't make decisions you'll regret later." There it was again, the assumption that wanting something beautiful meant I wasn't thinking clearly, that choosing to spend money on my wedding day meant I was being impulsive and irresponsible. "I won't regret it, Emma." "How can you be sure?" The question hung between us like a challenge. How could I be sure? How could anyone be sure about anything, especially something as expensive and emotionally fraught as a wedding? But as I sat there looking at my sister, who clearly believed she was saving me from my own poor judgment, I realized something important. I was sure, not about every detail of the wedding, not about whether the flowers would be perfect, or the weather would cooperate, or whether our photographer would capture every moment we wanted to remember. But I was sure that David and I had found the place where we wanted to promise to love each other forever, and I was sure that compromising on that to make other people more comfortable with our budget wasn't worth it. Because when we walked into that ballroom and I could picture our whole life starting there, I knew it wasn't just about the venue, I said. It was about choosing something that mattered to us, even if it meant sacrificing other things. It was about believing that our love story deserved a setting as beautiful as it felt. Emma was quiet for a moment, twirling pasta around her fork without taking a bite. "That's really romantic, Liv." "It is. I just hope you still feel that way when you're eating ramen noodles for dinner every night to pay off the credit card bills." And there it was. The thing she'd been dancing around all lunch, all month, maybe all my life. The belief that I didn't deserve beautiful things because I couldn't afford them as easily as she could. That my dreams were somehow less valid because my budget was smaller. I stood up from the table, my appetite completely gone. "Thanks for lunch, Emma. And for the apology. But I think we should probably avoid talking about wedding stuff from now on." She looked genuinely surprised. "Liv, come on. Don't be like that. I'm just trying to look out for you." "I know you think you are," I said, putting on my jacket. "But what you're actually doing is making me feel bad about the happiest decision David and I have ever made together, and I can't keep listening to that." I left money on the table for my salad, and walked out of Angelo's feeling something I'd never felt after a conversation with Emma. Proud of myself for walking away, instead of trying to convince her she was wrong. That evening I told David about lunch, about Willowbrook Farm and Emma's research into cancellation policies and the way she'd made saving money sound like the only responsible choice. "Do you want to go look at it?" he asked. when I'd finished the farm, just out of curiosity. I considered it for about 3 seconds. No, I said. I really don't. I don't want to second guess our choice anymore, and I don't want to give Emma the impression that her opinion matters more than ours does. David smiled and pulled me closer to him on the couch. Good, because I've been thinking about our wedding day, about dancing with you in that ballroom, and I get excited every single time. That's not something I want to give up. Neither did I. For the first time since Emma's dinner at our apartment, I felt completely sure about Rosewood Manor again. It was going to be expensive, and we were going to have to be careful with money for a while, but it was going to be worth it. I just had no idea how much Emma disagreed with that assessment, or what she was willing to do to prove her point. 3 days later, I was at my desk trying to concentrate on a budget proposal when my phone rang. Patricia from Rosewood Manor, which was unusual since we'd already handled all the initial paperwork and weren't scheduled to meet again for another month. "Hi Olivia," she said, and there was something in her tone that immediately put me on edge. "I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time, but I needed to discuss something with you about your October 15th booking." My stomach dropped. "Is everything okay?" "Well, that's what I'm trying to figure out," Patricia said carefully. "I received a call this morning from someone claiming to be you, asking about canceling your wedding reservation. When I explained our cancellation policy, the caller seemed to know quite a bit about your booking details." I felt the blood drain from my face. "I didn't call you about canceling anything. That's what I suspected, which is why I'm calling to verify. The woman on the phone had your booking confirmation number and knew the date and approximate guest count, but something felt off about the conversation. She kept asking very specific questions about our refund policy and whether we had a waiting list for your date." My hands were shaking now. "Did she give you a name?" "She said she was Olivia Chen, but when I asked her to confirm her address for our records, she gave me a different street address than what we have on file. That's when I decided to call you directly." I closed my eyes and tried to process what Patricia was telling me. Someone had called Rosewood Manor pretending to be me, trying to cancel my wedding. Someone who knew enough details about my booking to sound legitimate but not enough to pull it off completely. "Patricia," I said slowly, "can you tell me what time you received that call? Let me check my notes." "It was this morning around 10:30. Why?" I pulled up the group text thread I had with my family, scrolling back to this morning. There it was, a message from Emma sent at 10:15. "In meetings all morning, talk tonight." Posted right before someone called my wedding venue pretending to be me. "Is there any chance this person could have gotten access to my booking information?" I asked. "Not from us," Patricia said firmly. "We take client confidentiality very seriously. The only way someone could have those details is if they got them from you directly, or from someone you shared them with." I thought about all the people I'd told about Rosewood Manor. David obviously, my parents, my best friend Sarah, my grandmother, and Emma, who'd been asking pointed questions about the booking ever since I'd mentioned it. "Patricia, I need to ask you something, and please be completely honest with me. Do you have other couples interested in October 15th? There was a pause. "We do have a waiting list, yes. It's a very popular date, and we had several couples express interest when they heard about your cancellation slot opening up. So if I were to cancel, you could fill the date immediately, most likely within 24 hours, Patricia confirmed. "Is there something specific you're concerned about?" I took a deep breath. "I think someone is trying to manipulate me into giving up my wedding date. Someone who knows I'm worried about the cost and thinks they can pressure me into canceling by making it seem like the responsible thing to do." "Oh my," Patricia said quietly. "That's quite serious. Have you considered filing a police report? Impersonating someone to interfere with their vendor contracts could potentially be fraud." "I'm not sure I have enough proof yet," I said, though the idea of involving law enforcement made me feel slightly better about the situation. "But I want to be very clear that I am not canceling my wedding. I will not be canceling my wedding, and if anyone calls claiming to be me again, please don't give them any information about my booking." "Absolutely," Patricia said. "And Olivia, I hope you work this out. I've been doing weddings for 15 years, and I can usually tell which couples are going to be truly happy with their choice. You and David have that look." After I hung up, I sat staring at my computer screen, trying to figure out what to do next. The rational part of my brain said I should call Emma directly and confront her about the phone call to Rosewood Manor. But another part of me, the part that had been dealing with Emma's manipulation for my entire life, wanted to see how far she was willing to take this before I called her out. I decided to test a theory. That evening, I called Emma and asked if she wanted to grab coffee over the weekend. I made my voice sound stressed and uncertain, like someone who was having serious second thoughts about her wedding plans. Actually, I said when she answered, I was hoping we could talk more about that farm venue you mentioned. Willowbrook, I've been thinking about what you said, about costs spiraling out of control, and maybe I should at least look at some alternatives. Emma's voice immediately brightened. Oh Liv, I'm so glad you called. I've been worried about you all week, and I didn't want to push, but I really think looking at other options could be good for you. Just to give you some perspective. Yeah, I said, letting a note of defeat creep into my voice. David's been working so many extra shifts, and I can see how tired he is. Maybe we're being selfish trying to have this fancy wedding when we could use that money for so many other things. You're not being selfish, Emma said quickly, though I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. You're being practical, and honestly, some of the most beautiful weddings I've been to were at unexpected venues. There's something really special about a place that's not trying so hard to be impressive, you know. I bit my tongue to keep from pointing out that her own wedding had been at the most expensive hotel ballroom in the city. Do you think it's too late to change my mind about Rosewood Manor? I asked, making my voice small and uncertain. It's never too late to make a smart decision, Emma said. And I bet if you explain the situation to them, they'll be understanding about the cancellation fee. Venues deal with this kind of thing all the time. The cancellation fee. Something I hadn't mentioned to Emma, something that would only come up if someone had called to ask about canceling my booking. What cancellation fee? I asked innocently. There was a brief pause before Emma answered. Oh, I just assumed there would be one. Most contracts have some kind of penalty for backing out, don't they? But I'm sure it's not too bad, especially if you're honest about your financial situation. She was good. I had to give her that. Smooth enough to cover for her slip-up without missing a beat. But I'd caught it, and now I knew for certain that Emma had been the one calling Patricia pretending to be me. You're probably right, I said. Listen, can I ask you something? And please be honest with me. Of course, Liv. Anything. Do you think I'm making a huge mistake? Like not just financially, but in general. Do you think David and I aren't ready to get married? What? No, of course not. I think you and David are great together. I just think you're letting wedding industry pressure convince you that you need to spend a fortune to prove how much you love each other. It's just that when we were at Rosewood Manor, everything felt so perfect. But then when I think about the money, I start to panic. Like maybe I'm being one of those bridezillas who loses perspective about what really matters. Emma made sympathetic noises. Sweetie, the fact that you're even questioning it shows how level-headed you are. Bridezillas don't worry about budgets or think about their future financial stability. They just spend whatever it takes to get what they want. So you think I should cancel Rosewood Manor? I think you should do what feels right for your situation, Emma said carefully. But if you're having doubts, maybe that's your instincts telling you something important. We talked for another 20 minutes, with Emma carefully avoiding direct advice, while making it clear that she thought canceling Rosewood Manor would be the smart, mature, responsible choice. She offered to go with me to look at Willowbrook Farm, to help me research other affordable venues, to be there for support when I made the difficult phone call to Patricia. By the time we hung up, I was furious. Not just about the phone call to Rosewood Manor, but about the entire campaign Emma had been waging against my wedding plans. The concerned questions, the alternative venues, the financial warnings disguised as sisterly advice. She'd been systematically undermining my confidence while positioning herself as the helpful voice of reason. But I was also strangely calm. For weeks, Emma's comments had been eating away at my certainty about Rosewood Manor, making me question whether David and I were being foolish or irresponsible. Now that I knew her concerns weren't genuine, that they were part of a deliberate attempt to manipulate me into changing my mind, I felt free to trust my original instincts again. David was working late that night, so I had the apartment to myself to think about what I wanted to do next. I could confront Emma directly, tell her I knew about the phone call and demand an explanation. I could ignore the whole thing and just make sure Patricia knew not to take any more calls from people claiming to be me. Or I could do something that had never occurred to me before. I could beat Emma at her own game. The idea started small, just a fleeting thought about how satisfying it would be to prove Emma wrong about my ability to afford Rosewood Manor. But the more I thought about it, the more the idea grew into something bigger. Something that would not only secure my wedding venue, but also send a clear message about what I thought of her interference. I opened my laptop and started researching. It took me 3 hours of digging through vendor websites, social media pages, and online reviews, but I finally found what I was looking for. Emma's wedding 3 years ago had been beautiful, but it hadn't been perfect. I remembered her complaining afterward about several things that hadn't gone according to plan. The photographer who showed up late and missed some of the getting ready shots. The florist who substituted cheaper flowers without asking. The band that took too many breaks and left guests standing around during what should have been prime dancing time. But there was one vendor complaint that had really bothered Emma, something she'd brought up multiple times in the months after her wedding. The videographer. She'd paid premium rates for someone who promised cinematic artistic wedding videos. The kind of thing that looked like a short film instead of just documentation. What she'd gotten instead was shaky camera work, poor audio, and editing that looked like it had been done by someone's cousin with basic software. Emma had been so disappointed with the final product that she'd tried to get a partial refund, threatening to leave bad reviews and file complaints with the Better Business Bureau. The videographer had refused, pointing to contract language that said all sales were final regardless of customer satisfaction with the artistic choices. It had been a source of ongoing frustration for Emma, especially since several of her friends had been asking to see the wedding video, and she was too embarrassed by the quality to show it to anyone. I pulled up the videographer's website and was surprised to see that they were still in business, still advertising themselves as specialists in cinematic wedding storytelling. Their portfolio had improved significantly since Emma's wedding, but their prices had stayed exactly the same. I scrolled through their availability calendar and felt my heart skip a beat. They had an opening on October 15th, the same date as my wedding at Rosewood Manor. I stared at the screen for a long time, thinking about what Emma would say if she knew that the videographer who'd ruined her wedding was available to work on mine. She'd probably assume I was making another impulsive, expensive mistake, choosing style over substance just like she thought I was doing with the venue. But what if I wasn't just hiring them for my wedding? What if I was hiring them for something else entirely? I picked up my phone and called their booking line. "Hi," I said when someone answered. "I'm interested in your wedding videography services, but I have kind of an unusual situation. I'm wondering if you do any other types of event filming." "Absolutely," the person on the other end said. "We do corporate events, birthday parties, anniversary celebrations, pretty much anything where people want professional video documentation." "What about venue tours? Like if someone wanted to create a really high-quality promotional video for a wedding venue, would that be something you'd be interested in?" There was a pause. "That's definitely something we could do." "Are you thinking about marketing videos for your own venue, or would this be for a client?" "It would be for a venue I'm working with," I said, the lie coming easier than I expected. "Rosewood Manor out on Maple Ridge Road. They're looking to update their promotional materials, and I thought your cinematic style would be perfect for showcasing the property." We talked for another 15 minutes about rates, timeline, and what kind of footage would be most effective for marketing purposes. By the time I hung up, I had scheduled a consultation meeting for the following Tuesday and a tentative booking for a full day of filming on October 15th. The same day Emma thought I should be canceling my wedding reservation. Over the next few days, I put the rest of my plan together. I called Rosewood Manor and arranged to have a meeting with Patricia about additional promotional opportunities. I contacted 3 other wedding vendors, a florist, a caterer, and a string quartet, asking if they'd be interested in participating in a promotional video shoot that would showcase their work at a premier venue. Everyone said yes, especially when I mentioned that I'd be covering all the costs myself, and they'd receive professional marketing footage they could use for their own businesses. By Thursday, I had assembled what looked like a legitimate wedding industry collaboration. 5 vendors who thought they were participating in a marketing video, a venue manager who thought I was helping to create promotional content, and a videographer who had no idea they were about to film at the same location where they'd disappointed one of their previous clients 3 years earlier. The only thing left was to make sure Emma knew about it. I waited until Friday evening to call her, timing it so she'd be home from work but not yet committed to weekend plans. "Emma," I said when she answered, "I did it. I canceled Rosewood Manor." The silence on the other end of the phone was deafening. "Oh honey," she said finally, and I could hear genuine relief in her voice. "I know that was probably really hard, but I think you made the right decision. How are you feeling about it?" "Honestly, free," I said, putting as much conviction into my voice as I could manage. "You were completely right about the financial pressure. David and I sat down and really looked at our budget, and we realized we were about to make a terrible mistake." "I'm so proud of you," Emma said. "It takes real maturity to change course when you realize you're heading in the wrong direction. So what are you thinking for alternatives? Are you still interested in looking at Willowbrook Farm?" "Actually," I said, "I think we're going to take a step back from wedding planning for a while. Maybe look into postponing the whole thing until we're in a better financial position. David's been working so much overtime that we barely see each other, and I realize that's not how I want to start our marriage." Emma made more sympathetic noises, telling me how wise I was being, how much happier I'd be in the long run, how this was really the best possible outcome, even though it probably didn't feel like it right now. "There is one thing though," I said as our conversation was winding down. "Since I had to cancel on such short notice, Rosewood Manor is scrambling to fill the date." Patricia asked if I knew anyone who might be interested in a last-minute booking, and I immediately thought of you. "Me?" Emma sounded genuinely confused. "For your anniversary," I said innocently. "Didn't you and Marcus just have your 3rd anniversary? I was thinking maybe you could throw an anniversary party there, invite all your friends and family. It would be like renewing your vows, but less formal." Emma laughed. "Liv, that's sweet, but we just had our anniversary in February. And honestly, after planning one wedding, I'm not eager to jump into party planning anytime soon." "Oh right, February," I said, as if I'd forgotten. "Well, maybe just as a special date night then." Patricia mentioned that they sometimes do private dinners for couples who want to experience the venue without having a full event. You could see what all the fuss was about. "Maybe," Emma said, though she sounded doubtful. "I mean, it's a beautiful place, but I don't know if I need to spend money on a fancy dinner just to prove a point." "It wouldn't be about proving a point," I said. "It would be about treating yourself to something special. You work so hard, and you were so helpful to me during this whole wedding planning disaster. Consider it my way of saying thank you." We talked for a few more minutes before hanging up, with Emma promising to think about the anniversary dinner idea, and me promising to keep her updated on whatever David and I decided to do about postponing the wedding. As soon as I hung up, I called Patricia at Rosewood Manor. "Hi Patricia, it's Olivia Chen. I wanted to follow up on our conversation about the promotional video project." "Of course," Patricia said. "I've been thinking about it, and I'm really excited about the possibilities. When did you want to schedule the filming?" "October 15th, I said. "I know it's the same date as my original wedding booking, but I thought it would be perfect timing. All the vendors I'm working with are available that day, and we could really showcase what a full event setup looks like." "That works perfectly," Patricia said. "Should I keep your original reservation in place, then just under a different event type?" "Exactly," I said. "Same date, same time, same setup. But instead of a wedding, it'll be a promotional video shoot that happens to look exactly like a wedding." Patricia laughed. "I have to say, this is one of the more creative marketing collaborations I've been involved with. Your background in nonprofit marketing really shows." "Thank you," I said. "I'm hoping it'll be beneficial for everyone involved." And it would be, just not in the way Patricia expected. That night, David came home to find me sitting on our couch with a bottle of wine and a smile that probably looked slightly maniacal. "Okay," he said, settling in beside me. "What did you do?" I told him everything. About the phone call from Patricia, about Emma's slip-up regarding the cancellation fee, about the fake conversation where I'd pretended to cancel our wedding, and about the elaborate promotional video scheme I'd put together for October 15th. "So let me get this straight," David said when I'd finished. Emma thinks you canceled the wedding, but you actually just changed it from a wedding to a video shoot that looks exactly like a wedding, with all the same vendors and all the same costs. Right, and you're planning to film this fake wedding on the same date as our real wedding would have been, at the same venue where Emma thinks she convinced you not to get married. Right again. David was quiet for a moment, processing everything I'd told him. And what happens when Emma finds out that you lied about canceling? I took a sip of wine. Well, that depends on whether she shows up or not. Shows up to what? To our wedding, I said. Because here's the thing, David. I never actually canceled anything. I just told Emma I did. October 15th is still our wedding date, Rosewood Manor is still our venue, and all those vendors I hired for the promotional video. They're actually just our wedding vendors, who think they're doing double duty. David stared at me. So you're having our wedding disguised as a video shoot? I'm having our wedding exactly the way we planned it, I said. The video shoot story is just my cover for why all the same vendors are there, why everything looks like a real wedding, and why Emma might receive an invitation to what she thinks is a promotional event for a venue she convinced me not to use. You're going to invite Emma to our wedding after she tried to sabotage it. I'm going to invite Emma to what she thinks is a marketing video for Rosewood Manor, I corrected. What she doesn't know is that she'll be watching me marry the love of my life in the exact venue she spent months trying to convince me I couldn't afford. David started laughing. Not just chuckling, but deep, sustained laughter that made his whole body shake. Olivia Chen, he said when he could finally speak, you are absolutely diabolical. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? It's a perfect thing, he said, pulling me closer to him on the couch. Emma spent all this time trying to manipulate you into giving up your dream, and instead of just calling her out, you're going to make her watch you achieve it. The best part, I said, is that she'll never be able to claim she didn't know I could afford it. She'll be sitting right there watching me prove her wrong. David shook his head in amazement. I can't decide if I'm more impressed by how clever this plan is, or how completely it's going to blindside your sister. Both, I said, definitely both. Over the next 2 weeks, I refined the details of what I'd started thinking of as Operation Wedding Video. I sent Emma a beautifully designed invitation to an exclusive promotional filming event at Rosewood Manor, showcasing the venue's capabilities for luxury weddings. The invitation mentioned that light refreshments would be served, and that attendees would have the opportunity to see behind-the-scenes footage of high-end wedding production. Emma RSVP'd immediately, saying she was fascinated to see what all the fuss had been about regarding Rosewood Manor, and that she was proud of me for turning my disappointment about the venue into a professional opportunity. I also invited my parents, my best friend Sarah, David's family, and about 20 other people who had been on our original wedding guest list. Everyone received the same invitation, describing the event as a promotional video shoot, but I called each person individually to explain that they were actually invited to our surprise wedding. The reactions were mixed. My mom was thrilled by the drama of it all, and immediately started planning what to wear to her daughter's secret wedding. David's parents were confused but supportive, especially when I explained about Emma's attempts to sabotage our venue booking. Sarah thought the whole thing was either brilliant or completely insane, possibly both. My dad was the only one who expressed real concern about what I was doing. Liv, he said, during one of our phone calls, I understand why you're angry with Emma, and I don't blame you for wanting to prove her wrong. But this feels like it might cause permanent damage to your relationship with your sister. Dad, I said, Emma called my wedding venue pretending to be me, and tried to cancel my booking. She spent months undermining my confidence and making me feel guilty for wanting something beautiful for my wedding day. The relationship was already damaged. I'm just making sure she knows I noticed. But you're tricking her into coming to your wedding under false pretenses. What's she going to think when she realizes what happened? I considered his question seriously. I think she's going to realize that I'm not the pushover little sister she thought I was. And maybe next time she'll think twice before trying to manipulate me into giving up something that matters to me. And if she doesn't take it well, if she's embarrassed or angry or hurt by the deception, then she'll know how it felt when she tried to trick me into canceling the most important day of my life, I said. Dad, I love Emma, but I'm done letting her treat me like I'm too stupid or irresponsible to make my own decisions. He sighed. Just promise me you'll think about whether this is really how you want to handle things. Once you go through with this plan, you can't undo it. I promised him I'd think about it, and I did. For about 30 seconds. Because every time I considered backing down, I remembered Emma's voice on the phone with Patricia, pretending to be me, trying to cancel the wedding I'd worked so hard to make possible. Some lines once crossed, change everything. Emma had crossed mine. Now it was time for her to find out what that meant. October 15th arrived with perfect autumn weather, the kind of crisp, golden day that makes you believe in magic. I woke up at 5 in the morning, not because I had to, but because my body was humming with anticipation. Today was the day Emma would discover exactly how wrong she'd been about everything. Sarah arrived at 7 with coffee and bagels, ready to help me get ready for what she kept calling the most elaborate revenge plot in wedding history. My mom showed up an hour later with my dress, my grandmother's pearls, and tears in her eyes that she tried to hide behind her oversized sunglasses. "I still can't believe you pulled this off," Mom whispered as she helped me into the dress David had never seen. "When you told me what Emma did, I wanted to drive over there and give her a piece of my mind." "This is better than yelling at her," I said, watching myself in the mirror, as the dress transformed me into someone who belonged at Rosewood Manor. This way she'll never forget the lesson. By 10 o'clock I was ready, hair perfectly styled, makeup flawless, dress fitting like it had been made specifically for this moment. I looked exactly like what I was, a bride who had fought for her dream and won. David met me at the manor at 11 for our first look, a private moment before the chaos of the day began. When he turned around and saw me standing in the gardens where Emma had once insisted we couldn't afford to get married, his face went through about 6 different emotions before landing on pure joy. "You're incredible," he said, pulling me close enough to whisper in my ear. "Not just because you look beautiful, but because of what you did. You didn't let anyone take this away from us." "We didn't let anyone take this away from us," I corrected, but I was smiling so hard my cheeks hurt. The vendors arrived right on schedule, each one believing they were participating in an elaborate promotional video while actually setting up for our wedding. The videographer Emma had complained about for 3 years was there with professional equipment, completely unaware that he was about to film at the same venue where his previous work had been such a disappointment. The florist arranged centerpieces that looked like something from a magazine. The string quartet tuned their instruments in the ceremony space that overlooked the rose garden. Everything was perfect, which meant it was time for the guests to arrive. I watched from the bridal suite window as cars began pulling into the circular driveway. My college friends, David's coworkers from the shop, our neighbors from the apartment complex. Everyone who mattered to us, everyone who had supported our decision to have the wedding we wanted instead of the wedding other people thought we should want. And then at exactly 2:30, Emma's silver Mercedes pulled up to the front entrance. She stepped out wearing what looked like a designer blazer and heels that probably cost more than my monthly rent, looking around the manor grounds with the expression of someone surveying property they might consider purchasing. Even from 3 floors up, I could see her evaluating everything, probably calculating costs and wondering how much money she thought I'd wasted on canceling this place. Emma walked into Rosewood Manor, carrying a small gift bag and wearing the smile she used for networking events, ready to support her little sister's professional development while secretly feeling superior about her own life choices. She had no idea she was walking into my wedding. Patricia met Emma in the main lobby, just as we'd planned. From my window I could see them chatting, Patricia gesturing toward the ballroom where the reception setup was already complete. Emma nodded enthusiastically, probably impressed despite herself by how elegant everything looked. Other guests were arriving steadily now. Everyone who thought they were coming to a promotional video shoot but were actually here to witness David and me promise to love each other forever. The beauty of the plan was that it didn't matter what people thought they were attending. A wedding is a wedding, whether the guests know it beforehand or not. At 3 o'clock, Sarah knocked on the door of the bridal suite. "It's time," she said. "Everyone's here, the officiant is ready, and your sister is currently standing in the cocktail area admiring the flower arrangements and telling people how she advised you against booking this place." I took one last look in the mirror. The bride looking back at me was radiant, confident and completely ready to marry the man she loved in the exact venue she'd dreamed of, regardless of what anyone else thought about the cost. "Let's go get married," I said. The processional music started as I walked down the manor's main staircase toward the back terrace where our ceremony would take place. Through the tall windows, I could see guests taking their seats in the white chairs we'd rented, the string quartet playing softly in the background. David standing at the altar in his best suit with the biggest smile I'd ever seen. Emma was sitting in the third row, still looking around with appreciation for the venue setup, completely unaware that she was about to watch her sister get married in the place she'd spent months trying to convince her not to use. I stepped outside into the golden afternoon light, and the music swelled, every head turned toward me, including Emma's. For a split second, I saw confusion flash across her face, then understanding. Then something that might have been shock or anger or embarrassment, but definitely wasn't happiness. I walked down that aisle like I owned the place, because in that moment, I did. Every flower, every chair, every note of music was exactly what David and I had chosen for our wedding day. No compromises, no settling, no making do with less, because other people thought we couldn't afford better. When I reached David, he took my hands and whispered, "Look at her face." I glanced over at Emma, who was sitting perfectly still in her chair, her expression frozen somewhere between disbelief and mortification. She'd realized what was happening but was trapped in the middle of a wedding ceremony with nowhere to go, and no way to leave without causing a scene. The officiant began speaking about love and commitment and the courage it takes to promise forever to another person. About how true partnership means supporting each other's dreams even when they seem impossible. About choosing to build something beautiful together, regardless of what obstacles might stand in the way. I kept my eyes on David through most of the ceremony, but occasionally I'd glance over at Emma. She was listening to every word, probably hearing the parallels between what the officiant was saying and what she'd tried to prevent me from having. When we got to the vows, the part where David and I promised to support each other's dreams and trust each other's judgment, I saw her shift uncomfortably in her seat. "I promise to believe in us," I said, looking directly at David but speaking loudly enough for everyone to hear, even when other people think we're making mistakes. "I promise to choose what makes us happy, not what makes everyone else comfortable." David's vows were about building a life together that reflected our values, not other people's expectations. About being brave enough to want beautiful things and determined enough to make them happen. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, the entire crowd erupted in cheers. Everyone except Emma, who was sitting very still, clapping politely while looking like she'd rather be anywhere else in the world. The cocktail hour was where things got interesting. While David and I took photos with the videographer who'd disappointed Emma 3 years earlier, our guests mingled in the rose garden, drinking champagne and eating appetizers that cost exactly what I'd told Emma they would cost. I watched Emma navigate the cocktail hour like someone walking through a minefield. She'd congratulate people on the beautiful event, not realizing they all knew it was my actual wedding. She'd comment on how professional everything looked, not knowing that the other guests were my friends and family, not random industry professionals. My mom approached Emma during cocktail hour, and I was close enough to hear their conversation. "What a lovely event Olivia put together," Emma said, clearly fishing for information about how this promotional video had turned into an actual wedding. "Oh, it's perfect," Mom replied with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Exactly what she always dreamed of for her wedding day. Emma's face went pale. Her wedding day, October 15th, was always going to be Olivia's wedding day. Mom said calmly, the only question was whether certain people would be supportive enough to be included. I saw Emma excuse herself and head toward the ladies' room, probably to process what she'd just learned. When she came back, she looked like someone who'd been slapped awake from a very comfortable dream. During dinner, Emma was seated at a table with some of David's co-workers and their wives, people who had no idea who she was or what she'd tried to do to prevent this wedding from happening. I watched her make polite conversation while picking at her $85 per person meal, the same catering package she'd warned me I couldn't afford. The videographer was documenting everything, creating the professional wedding video that Emma's own wedding had lacked. The same person who'd disappointed her with shaky camera work and poor editing was now capturing every perfect moment of my wedding day in stunning detail. When it came time for toasts, David's best man spoke about how impressed he'd been by our determination to have the wedding we wanted, despite people telling us it was impossible. My maid of honor Sarah talked about how proud she was that I'd refused to compromise on my dreams just because other people thought they were too expensive. Olivia and David didn't just plan a wedding, Sarah said, raising her glass toward our head table. They proved that believing in yourself is more powerful than listening to people who want to limit your possibilities. I saw Emma flinch at that, probably realizing that everyone in the room understood the subtext of what Sarah was saying. The dancing started at 8 o'clock with our first dance to a song the string quartet had learned specifically for us. As David and I swayed together in the middle of that ballroom I'd fallen in love with the first time I saw it, I caught sight of Emma standing near the edge of the dance floor, watching us with an expression I couldn't quite read. During the parent dances and the bouquet toss and all the traditional wedding moments that cost money Emma thought we didn't have, she remained on the periphery, trapped between wanting to leave and not wanting to cause a scene by abandoning her sister's wedding. It wasn't until nearly 10 o'clock, when the party was in full swing and everyone was dancing to music that probably cost exactly what Emma thought it cost, that she finally approached me. "Congratulations," she said quietly, having to speak directly into my ear to be heard over the music. "Everything looks beautiful." "Thank you," I said, not making it easy for her by pretending this was a normal sister-to-sister conversation. Emma was quiet for a moment, watching the dance floor full of our friends and family, celebrating exactly the wedding David and I had wanted from the beginning. "I owe you an apology," she said finally. "Several apologies, actually." I waited for her to continue. "I called your venue," she admitted. "I pretended to be you and asked about canceling. I convinced myself I was trying to save you from making a financial mistake, but the truth is, I was uncomfortable with you having something this nice when I thought you couldn't afford it." "I know," I said simply. Emma looked surprised. "You know, Patricia called me immediately after you hung up. She knew it wasn't me because you gave her the wrong address." Emma closed her eyes. "God, Olivia, I'm so sorry, I can't believe I did that. But you did do it," I said. "You didn't just question my judgment or give me unwanted advice. You actively tried to sabotage my wedding because you couldn't handle the idea that I might be capable of something you thought was beyond me." "You're right," Emma said quietly. "I was wrong about everything, about what you could afford, about what you deserved, about whether you should want this in the first place. Looking around here tonight, seeing how happy you and David are, I realize I was trying to talk you out of something beautiful because it threatened my assumptions about our lives." I looked at my sister, really looked at her, trying to decide if this was genuine remorse or just Emma being Emma, saying whatever she thought would smooth things over. "Why did it bother you so much that I wanted to get married here?" I asked. Emma was quiet for a long time, long enough that I thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible over the music. "Because if you could afford Rosewood Manor on your non-profit salary and David's mechanic wages, it meant I'd been wrong about who we both were. I'd spent so long thinking that my job and my salary and my lifestyle meant I was more successful than you, that I was the sister who got to have nice things while you were the one who had to be practical and settle for less." She looked around the ballroom, taking in the crystal chandeliers and the flower arrangements and the elegantly dressed guests dancing to music performed by actual musicians. "But you're not settling for less," she continued. "You're just prioritizing different things. You chose to spend money on this day, on this experience, on making a memory that will last forever. And it's beautiful. It's more beautiful than my wedding was, honestly, because you and David look so genuinely happy." I felt some of the anger I'd been carrying for months start to loosen in my chest. Emma's apology felt real, like she'd actually thought about what she'd done and why she'd done it. "I'm sorry I tricked you into coming," I said. "I could have just confronted you about the phone call and worked things out like adults." Emma shook her head. "No, you couldn't have. I would have made excuses and tried to justify what I did and probably never really understood how wrong I was. This way, I had to sit here and watch you prove every single thing I said was incorrect. I had to see with my own eyes that you absolutely could afford this, that you and David absolutely deserved it, and that my opinion about your choices was completely irrelevant." She paused, watching David spin one of his nieces around the dance floor while the little girl giggled with delight. "You didn't just prove me wrong about the money," Emma said. "You proved me wrong about you. I underestimated how determined you were, how clever you were, and how far you were willing to go to protect something that mattered to you. I'm proud of you, Liv, and I'm ashamed of myself." We stood there for a moment, two sisters at a wedding that one of them had tried to prevent and the other had refused to give up. So what happens now? Emma asked. I looked around the ballroom, at David laughing with his friends, at my parents dancing together like teenagers, at all the people who had supported our choice to have the wedding we wanted instead of the wedding other people thought we should want. Now we dance, I said, taking Emma's hand and leading her onto the floor where our family was celebrating the beginning of David's and my life together. The party lasted until midnight, with guests dancing and laughing and taking photos with the videographer, who was capturing everything in the cinematic style Emma had paid for but never received. When the last song played and the final guest headed home, David and I stood alone in the ballroom that had started this whole adventure. No regrets, he asked, pulling me close for one more dance to music only we could hear. I thought about everything that had led us to this moment. The envelope that had started my search for the perfect venue, the months of planning and budgeting and sacrifice, Emma's attempts to convince me I was making a mistake, the phone call where she'd tried to cancel our booking, and the elaborate scheme I'd constructed to prove her wrong about everything. None, I said, not about the money, not about the venue, and not about what I did to Emma. Some battles are worth fighting, and this was one of them. 3 months later, Emma sent me a link to a wedding planning article about couples who'd gone into debt to pay for their dream weddings and later regretted it. But this time, instead of forwarding it with a message about being realistic or making smart financial choices, she added a note that said, "Glad this doesn't apply to you. Your wedding was perfect, and you made it work exactly like you said you would." David and I did pay off the wedding expenses, just like we'd planned. It took 18 months of careful budgeting and extra work, but we managed it without going into serious debt or regretting a single dollar we'd spent. We bought our house 2 years later than originally planned, but we bought it as a married couple who'd already proven we could work together to achieve something that mattered to us. The videographer delivered our wedding film 6 weeks later, and it was everything Emma's wedding video should have been but wasn't. Cinematic, artistic, and beautifully edited, capturing every moment of the day when I'd refused to let anyone else's limitations become my own. I never told Emma that we'd hired the same videographer who disappointed her 3 years earlier. Some details are better left as private victories. But I did frame one photo from that day and hang it in our hallway. It's a shot of the entire wedding party on the steps of Rosewood Manor, everyone smiling and celebrating, with Emma clearly visible in the background, watching her little sister live exactly the life she'd once tried to convince her she couldn't afford. Every time I walk past that photo, I remember that the most expensive thing about our wedding wasn't the venue or the flowers or the catering. It was the lesson I taught everyone who thought they knew better than I did about what I was capable of achieving. Some people said I went too far, that humiliating Emma at my own wedding was cruel and unnecessary, but I didn't humiliate Emma. I simply refused to be diminished by her limitations. Emma humiliated herself by trying to sabotage something beautiful because she couldn't imagine her little sister deserving it. The truth is, I would have been happy to share that perfect day with Emma as my supportive big sister. She's the one who chose to attend as the woman who'd tried to prevent it from happening. I just made sure she understood the difference. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.